I am pumped to be chatting with my friend John Baldino, who's the president at Humoriso, which does HR outsourcing and consulting, and he happens to host his own HR podcast called The First Copy. John, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Joel. I'm glad to be here.
Today is Halloween. We're recording it on Halloween.
We are.
I want to know, what is your all-time favorite costume that you got to dress up?
Thankfully, you gave me like 3 minutes before we started to tell me you were going to ask that, because it was like, oh, which one? I would have to say I purchased a Disney official Jack Sparrow costume some years ago with the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. I loved that costume. I mean, like the full everything, the wig and hat. I did the eyeliner, like the whole face makeup thing.
Yeah.
I looked really good, I have to say.
One year I did David Bowie from The Labyrinth and just went all out. I got the whole get up, and that was a lot of fun.
So they're remaking Labyrinth. So I just...
What?
Yes. A little bit more of a musical. So you might be able to resurrect that.
So I'm super excited to have you on, because what I think is really interesting is that through your work at Humoriso, you get to work with small businesses, mid-sized companies, and even large enterprise groups.
Yep.
The past few years, I'll say specifically, it's been interesting talking to HR people, and the top two priorities across the board typically have been talent attraction, talent retention, or sometimes they swap places. Those obviously have kind of fallen down the board in this kind of cooler job market. But I want to know, from your experience, what are some of the main HR challenges or HR priorities across these different market segments?
We're speaking broad category, because I would say, right, on the SMB side, it's interesting because I think that there is still a bit of talent attraction that matters to them, because they're trying to capture the fallout from the enterprise level of RIFs and layoffs, that this might be their opportunity to get a particular skill set into their organization that, let's say, a year ago, they weren't as competitive to be able to attract. But that aside, I would say some of the other things that we're seeing are skill development. So I would say that there's a bit of a competency consideration around beyond just knowledge introduction, more than just, hey, watch this video in our learning library and check off this box that says that you've watched it, right? But really looking to say, how do we truly develop skill in people, not just introduce, because effectively that's all that was introducing skill to people. So are there opportunities to practice? Are there opportunities to test? And I think I would say SMB and mid-market are hungry to have that happen, because they can scale better by doing things like that. It's not as easy just to say, let me hire for what I need, because the job market is as difficult. So they really have had to look a little more internally, and their approach to learning. Connected to that, I would say we're also seeing much more of a appetite for aligned HR technologies. What makes sense for us where we are at the moment, and walking into it knowing that a software that we may use right now may not be the software we keep 2 years from now, whether because of growth, whether because of growing beyond what it can offer. Sometimes some software really can handle 100, 200, 300 employees, right? Great, wonderful, fine. But you start to get into 500, 750, 1,000. What should that look like? What other components should be there? I think that we're realizing as a whole, right, in the construct of the economy at the moment, if we're going to be competitive, the software is a tool. It's not a mandate. We've got to figure out a way that we don't feel so tied to a particular brand as a mandate, but rather what is the function we're trying to solve for, and how does that grow, and how do we change where we need to?
From a tech perspective, it sounds like the impetus on tech providers right now is being able to make it easier to utilize the tool, get better adoption quickly, because there is in the marketplace less of a tolerance for low adoption, low utilization, and then sticking with the same provider for years just because they're who you've always gone with. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and we haven't done a great job of implementation. I mean implementation internally, right? Areas of adoption, change, the dreaded we can't turn on all the modules right now. Let's just do some. We'll get to the other modules down the road. And now it's 2 years later and you're not turning on those modules. It's never going to happen. Those kinds of things become Achilles heels, plural, in a variety of organizations because you become less competitive. What I try to remind organizations of often, and this is, I don't care if you're on Workday at the enterprise level, right, Dayforce, down to Gusto, or Bamboo at the, let's say, SMB level and everything in between, often you're paying for things already that you're just not utilizing. And so you will be a curmudgeon about an employee who isn't doing everything that they should be doing, and we're paying for them to be here, and let me shake my fist in frustration about it. But you seem to be really fine to continue to pay a bill where you're only utilizing 40% of what you're paying for. How come? Why aren't you shaking your fist about how do we handle that better, right? You're not. And part of that is fear, because the technology seems more advanced than maybe many within the organization know how to do. Those that have exercised smartness in rollout with implementation have leaned on the fact that they're good software implementers, but recommended either consultative considerations, project management types of considerations, so that the modularization of things can happen concurrently, a change management plan can go forward, and adoption can get to the level where it needs to be so that people really experience the fullness of it and probably will like it more than the bits and pieces, right? It's really just about getting it adopted and implemented, and that's internal. And organizations really are finding that they can't hide anymore. They're really going to have to step into this.